everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I'm here with my cohort, Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing really good, and I'm really excited because there is another in our midst, and it's a name, a voice we haven't heard here for a little while, and we're very excited to have our friend Brian back. It's been almost a full year,
Yeah.
and that's a little embarrassing to say, but we've reached out to Brian, and Brian's got a topic. How are you this evening, Brian?
I'm doing great, Nick. Doing great, Brendan. Thanks for having me back on. I've really missed being a part of the Ghost Furnace here, and I think this is going to be a good program tonight.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you back, Brian. Like I said, like Nick was saying, it's been a while. If I had a dollar for every time me and Nick had been like, "Oh, we need to get Brian on for this or that," I'd have quite a few dollars. So,
Anytime animals of unusual size are brought up, because of course you got us
which is
rolling with the whole
which
Thunderbird
is which,
story,
which is often.
which
Yeah,
Absolutely.
led to at least two other Thunderbird stories.
yeah.
I,
God,
yeah.
I was literally just talking to someone about that recently when someone was saying like, "Oh, like Thunderbirds are just like California condors," and I was like, like my buddy Brian saw one that didn't look anything like a California condor, so like you're wrong, you know. So it was a fun conversation, but
Well, it's great to know you finally drank the Kool-Aid and
oh yeah.
we have further shows on that topic.
Well, and not to get off topic, but I'll say something. Brendan actually called me. It's maybe a couple months ago
Mhm.
now, because
Yeah.
you
We
want
never
you want to tell
we never
Brian what
talked
you
about
saw?
this. We never talked about this.
We
Yeah.
never talked about
So
this, and I think if not now,
yeah, when? So I have a like, and I think everyone else should adopt this policy. Whenever you see something weird or something weird happens, call somebody if you can do so safely. Uh, and just to like memorialize it as a thing that happened so you can get it off of your chest and just, you know. So I was driving, this all it was, I was driving down 79, middle of the day, normal, sunny afternoon. I had the shadow of a bird pass from my back left to my back right, excuse me, to my front left. So going north, coming from the northwest to the southeast. And big shadow in the shape of a bird. And it's one of those things where I am sure that it was just a large bird that was just at a good enough angle that the shadow really did show up properly, you know? Um, because whenever you have like a Piper Cub fly over at like a low altitude, you can see like the outline of the plane, you know? And that's what it was, that's kind of what it looked like, except it looked like a bird, except very, very large. And I immediately thought to myself, I'm like, well, if this was just like a turkey vulture or something, I just don't know like what the angle would have to be for it to actually show up that way, given like the contrast between the shadow and the ambient light. That's all there was to it, but I immediately called Nick and I was just like, I need to tell something about this because it was weird. And we of course talked about, we're like, I think Brian would find this interesting.
I have seen several birds. I'm much more mindful when I'm out,
Right.
particularly through this area, through the Butler County area. I think I can say that much.
Yeah.
Or in Mercer County area, where I travel mostly. I have seen some very large birds that were black, dark,
hmm
that I have had some second thoughts about,
hmm
and trying to debunk what they are. And there are some very large predator birds in this side of the state. I can say
hmm
that much.
For sure. So,
so despite us getting into the avian topic,
how can we not?
that's not what you came. You told us, because I'd reached out maybe a month ago, and I said, Brian, how's it been? Didn't know if you had anything that you'd want to bring up, and you brought up a topic that I'm interested in. Don't know a whole lot about, but what I found it particularly interesting was that you said this was something that you find probably more unsettling than many other topics that go in that pseudoscientific and um, spooky realm, for lack of better words. What did you want to talk about tonight? I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, what I had sent you some information about was my fascination with remote viewing. And remote viewing, in the sense that it is a phenomenon where you are able to see either into the past or the future, even beyond Earth's atmosphere, out into space or other entities, other dimensions, those types of things. But in particular, the ability to see recordings essentially of events, people, situations, um, things that have already happened, things that are yet to happen. And I first became introduced to this a while back. I mean, I think all of us probably watch a lot of the Discovery Channel types of shows and things that are on there. There's a number of historical kinds of things, and I ran into the remote viewing topic maybe a year or two ago, and it was a late at night documentary, and they talked about the CIA program, Project Stargate was what it was called. It's completely unclassified or declassified at this point, which was a secret governmental program where they set this unit of people up in a room, and these individuals would project far ahead or in the maybe the recent future or close future or distant future to actually determine what the enemy was doing. It was a CIA program.
Question for you, real quick, Brian, and you might not know the answer, but I remember some years ago there was a book and then a movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. Uh, is this related to that? Because it sounds very similar, or at least aspects of it sound very similar.
I'm not really familiar with that particular text itself. What I'm familiar with is more of the Cold War dynamics that the CIA set up a unit or several units that actually were positioned specifically to spy on our enemies. At that time, it would have been the Soviet Union, maybe China, maybe Vietnam, whoever the enemies were. And the enemies change over time, but to determine what was actually being done or what a particular area of the country or geopolitical area of the world was doing, they wanted to know. It was almost like a spy satellite, but it involved people, and they were given a very bland prompt or task, and they were asked to either draw or illustrate or write what they were actually seeing. And that's, one of the most popular individuals is Angela Ford. She's been all over the place. She is a person that still teaches remote viewing. She's been on the Sean Ryan show here more recently. That was one of the influences that I saw. The other influence that has a close relationship to this that I want to talk a little bit about tonight is Father Pellegrino Enretti. I think I have his name, Ernetti, I think is how you pronounce it. He was a priest who uh, indicated that he had produced a device that was able to be dialed up, so to speak, like a radio or a TV. It had a TV screen. It was called a chronovisor. And when I watched this material, I was totally frightened by the prospect that somebody could detect radio waves or electromagnetic energy, and it somehow that electromagnetic energy was able to be deciphered or transformed into a visual that someone could dial back and see something that happened 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or more, and be able to report on it or watch it like you were there. That in itself seemed just totally frightening to me that somebody could actually do something like that. And we can talk a little more about it as you have questions, but just to kind of introduce the show, that's what we're looking at is how do we look at things that are recorded in our daily experience? Is that actually a thing?
Yeah.
And can that actually be deciphered either by people or by a machine?
Well, and I have two quick things. First off, The Men Who Stare at Goats 2004 book by John Ronson. And apparently that was about this Stargate project, although the book doesn't mention it by name, according to what I've read here. John Ronson, if you've never read him, his So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I think, is a great book for our times. But this Chronovision, I hope I got the name correct this time, that is exceedingly fascinating to me as an idea, but I can see problems with it already. And I also understand how unnerving that can be because I think one of the fantasies I've always had from the time I was a really young kid, I always wanted to have like special glasses because, and this is something you and I have talked about, driving through some of the towns where some of these towns around us were big lumber towns, and you look at the homes and some of the buildings and you say, my gosh, what did this place look like, 80 years ago? And I always wish I could have special glasses that I could turn a dial and be an intangible observer. But with this vision thing, there's the personal problem I see, but then there's just a practical problem, which is the personal is I remember when I had a relative pass and I thought, oh my gosh, if they, going through Catholic school, if they're watching over me, there's certain times in my life that I would really rather they not see because they're gonna think less of me and whatnot. But that's one thing. So if people are able to tune in with some sort of device and see me, there are aspects that I would rather they not. The practical thing though is with this device, which I think is in ways similar to the radio that scans. How do they establish where the camera is? Is it have to be wherever this device is located and it has only that range? Or like I'm very curious as to the supposed mechanics of it in that way.
Yeah, Father Unetti, since we're going to jump to that maybe first, the chronovisor was a alleged, and I'm going to say alleged because I don't think anyone's ever seen. There's been people who have created drawings or seen supposed photos of what it might look like, but in actuality, my research indicated that there was really never a tangible device. It was a description. This Father Arnetti indicated that he had brought, and this is what makes the story even a little bit more, wow, is this really believable? That he had brought Werner von Braun and Fermi, who was one of the scientists of the Manhattan Project, together along with other very big named scientists of the day. And of course, Werner von Braun is our father of our NASA and space and moon program, who was a former Nazi or former, member of the
Yeah.
Nazi Party
Project Paperclip
who
guy.
we actually captured and got him to go on our side. That you took these really big, profoundly intelligent and historical figures. He said that he brought them together. They created this television-like device. Now, keep in mind, back in the 50s, there was television. We did have some type of television. That technology was correct. But that he brought these cathode tube, and there's some other rudimentary electronic
Hmm.
pieces of the day, and it was able to detect visual signals that pertain to a timeline of your choosing, whatever the timeline that you chose. And he claimed that he had seen, and this is what really kind of freaks me out a little bit. He says he claimed that he saw the actual crucifixion of Christ. He claims that he saw a Roman emperor. I think it was during Cicero's day that he claimed that he saw something else from, back in the ancient times. But no one ever really saw that. No one could ever really verify it. But I think he created enough interest as an urban legend and he actually released a picture supposedly of Christ on the cross. Well, this was debunked later on as being an actual photo of a sculpture by a classic medieval artist. And this stuff was not really real. He had just created it. And then I think it really made the Vatican, and they call it the Vatican chronovisor, which is really not, it's kind of a misnomer because they are not the ones that had anything to do with it. They were the ones who said, we got to deal with this because this is not natural. This is not
Right.
holy, whatever it is. They wanted to squash it. And so the idea was is that he had to make basically an apology and say, later in, that this was not true. This was, but no one has ever really factually verified that this device even existed or if it even worked. There's been since subsequently no verification of this. The projection is that the materials were disassembled or somehow put away in the Vatican vault or Vatican library where it will never see the light of day again. But the whole idea is fascinating when we look at other lines of thinking concerning the stone tape theory, for example,
Hmm.
concerning remote viewing, for example. If you look at even the back in the day, H.G. Wells' Time Machine was very popular back in the late 1800s.
And it's almost like the canonical book on time travel because so many ideas of time travel in literature appear to stem from Wells' book.
That's correct. And I think that when you look at all those lines of reasoning, and we even say, and for the listener, the stone tape theory basically says that there are substances such as wood or stone that records certain things that have happened in a given room or a given area around that stone or that wood of a building.
Yeah.
That
And I,
essentially a
and I know
building. Yeah.
ports in particular, and I think one of the reasons why I can kind of entertain that idea a little bit personally is because so much of our energy, so much of our brain is electrical in nature. And of course, we use quartz and other minerals as like computer memory and whatnot. But yes,
So essentially, when you look at remote viewing, you look at this concept of time travel or being able to access visually a timeline where something is detecting an event that actually happened. You begin to really wonder. And both of you know that I'm an amateur radio operator. I've been in communications for many years. I've used radio waves. It is a thing that you can send radio waves, and you have a receiver that can detect that visual signal or that signal and convert it into a visual representation. I mean, right now we are using internet and other cobblestone of technology that is converting our signals into visual because we can see each other. I don't know if your listeners know that, but we can see each other and we can hear each other in real time. But that's the difference. It's real time or recorded information that is sent, or you have, ionization of a cloud, and you can bounce signals from one point to another point in the world.
or
This is
bounce
all like
your radio signal off the moon and back to you.
Absolutely. It's all related to electronic magnetic waves or electronics. It all has an electrical basis. So why could we not do that? And that's a really hard gap to try to explain is how could somebody detect something that happened 2000 years ago versus, currently right now we're detecting each
Right.
other.
So I think that brings up it's a good question, Brian, where I think that like the first major hurdle to get over is maybe like again the temporal element is looking back in time remotely. Is that easier or harder than looking at something currently remotely? Because like you said, if there is some sort of electromagnetic or radiation based imprint, then maybe looking back is easier. than looking current, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think that like that's the first kind of distinction that needs to be made is because you had mentioned like the CIA stuff, and there's been multiple studies that they've done where they're trying to look at what other countries are doing and things like that. And I wonder if those mechanics are the same or different, if it's like right now versus last week, or in the case of the spectral the chronovisor 2000 years ago. If you're looking back in time, does it matter if you're going back 5 minutes or 5,000 years?
Well, and the other thing that I consider is that even a, what makes it so frightening to me when you really consider the magnitude of what that would mean, is that actually something that is natural and appropriate? I mean, there's all this ethical thing. I always look at that to some degree. I'm
The
thinking to
ethics
myself,
of the ethics
wow,
of time
that just
travel
seems kind of
and remote
not right
viewing.
to do
Yeah.
that. I mean, it seems fascinating. And boy, I can't pull my eyes away from that thought of doing it. There's a part of you as
Hmm.
humankind, we've always kind of looked at time travel as being really a very neat thing to do and fascinating. But is it ethical? Is it
Right.
appropriate? Is it altering our timeline?
Like, is there a set of parameters you could set up as like a like third person, almost omniscient observer, where you could look back without, like you said, adjusting anything,
If
or
parameters have to be
right.
established, that means people can violate them. And if
That's
people can
true.
violate them, somebody would
Somebody
violate them.
somebody
But
will.
that's another conversation. I think
Yeah.
if there's validity to the Catholic Church having some sort of prototype and having it
Hmm.
stashed away, um, I could see why they would because, we've talked so much recently about memory and storytelling and how
Hmm.
things change. I think there would be a fear of not only could this be, again, their beliefs are their beliefs. I have no reason to doubt that they believe them earnestly. And so, well, where did this technology come from? Is this some sort of evil thing, which I think you allude to a little bit, but also it could be could this change things heretically as well? And I think because there's all the Gnostic texts, and I think I don't know. I'm going down a different road, but
No, but
part
the
of part of
ethics,
what
yeah.
I wonder too is just again, Brian, you talked about being able to bounce signals off clouds, the electronics. These are all sorts of things we can measure and whatnot. If this person has claimed to have seen like the crucifixion of Christ and whatnot, my thinking is, especially since you talked about he presented a photo and that was pretty thoroughly debunked, it sounds like it's just again, okay, it's one thing to be able to create a device and look into the past. That's just one hurdle. The next hurdle is, well, how do you then you're scanning in one direction. Your x-axis is just time. Your y-axis is the all of the universe. Where how do you scan to control where the camera's placed? And even then, if there's something real to it, I don't understand how you could reliably get anywhere and any time because, like with radio signals, or we talked about television signals that are broadcast that are traveling into space, they're not everywhere.
Hmm.
And certain signals aren't going to be able to be picked up in certain places. It's just, we have like real challenges broadcasting, more than like a 300-mile radius some signals and whatnot. I don't know. I'm just it's a really the chronovisor is a really fascinating thing, and part of me knows that if I had one, I would be addicted to it. But I definitely I have problems with the again the mechanics of it, and I feel some of your concerns too. Like is j- you can do many things that doesn't mean they're good for you. We could go with many different examples, and I don't know. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I think there are still those individuals that believe that there's still something to this chronovisor. Obviously, there's enough of an interest in it, or it wouldn't have showed up on some of the shows. However, it's clearly not. First of all, if you had somebody like Werner von Braun and several of these other really prolific scientists who, I mean, quite frankly, they had better things to do, in the day, like sending somebody to the moon or creating the H bomb or whatever it is. Why would they involve themselves with lesser known, no disrespect, but a priest who was fairly obscure, and maybe he wasn't in the religious sense, but in the larger scientific. And I guess he was
Mhm.
a physician, or he was trained in, not a physician, but in the physical sciences and so forth. He was a musician and some other things. That doesn't make sense. And why would you tell everybody like that, but not be able to prove or provide anything substantive?
And I look at some of the achievements, some notorious achievements of some of the people that he supposedly reached out to, and I wonder, well, if they didn't have the good sense not to do this, that, and the other thing, but they had the good sense not to, promulgate the coronavisor. That's the other thing I don't buy. If this technology had been demonstrated to some of these people, I can't legitimately demonstrate it. I can't imagine them not running with it.
Well, right. I feel like there's such a thread of not a thread, but it's such a fine line between things that are absolutely bonkers, science fiction fake versus some of the like very real theories and breakthroughs that people were making at the time, and honestly, are still making today. Um, I think a lot of these scientists who are kind of on the cutting edge are very aware of how scientific paradigms shift. And I think they're very aware of how quickly disruptive technology show up. So I wonder if part of it was just them being like, well, let's check and see if there's anything to this just to be safe. Because maybe it isn't correct, but maybe there is something to it, or maybe there is something that they can use from it. That's my first inclination. Because again, someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I have a chronovisor," like I'm not interested, you know. So I could put myself in that mindset. And when Brian, you mentioned like the morality side of things, um, you think of some of the stuff that Edison was doing and some of the stuff that Nikola Tesla had been doing previously, that like really on the edge of a lot of things that like again, where's that line between like the line between science and pseudoscience isn't as cut and dry sometimes, especially when those things are in the process of like coming out.
Yeah, I I think that there's probably a little bit of there's more than out there than what we really understand. I have seen some recent work that was done on remote viewing, very recent experimentation. It was on a documentary where they literally, this is within like a year or two ago, they had individuals set up remotely. I think it was in Wyoming or
Mm-hmm.
Montana out west, and they were actually reviewing and looking at what purported unidentified flying saucers
Mm-hmm.
or something of that nature. And they had another group of these remote viewers who were, I don't know, 100, 200 miles away in a room enclosed with no windows,
Mm-hmm.
who were basically describing what these other folks were out in the field with telescopes and other equipment, high-tech equipment,
Mm-hmm.
photography equipment, were capturing. And what they captured, what they found was that these were legitimate, I don't know if I would say legitimate, but what was presented was legitimate UFO structures or
Mm-hmm.
crafts. And they had one of the individuals that was a part of this study. He was actually part of the British Defense uh,
Mm-hmm.
He was a defense minister at one time. I mean,
Sounds like a
legitimate
pretty serious gentleman.
legitimate
Yeah,
person. I mean, this
right.
is not
Yeah.
like fly by night person who doesn't have
Hmm.
experience. This was a controlled study. But if you really read about remote viewing, CIA cut it because it was really diminishing returns on its accuracy.
So that it suggests to me that if they were going to invest that much time, because this went on from at least the late 60s, I think you said it was
Hmm.
finally cut in 1995. That is, as far as longitudinal studies go, a pretty, good
Hmm.
time. I would imagine that that suggests that they saw enough that kept them going, kept the momentum to suggest that
Right.
there's something to it, but it, as you
Yeah.
said, it was too unreliable. I don't know what you make of that. Can we draw then that at least those people involved to kept the funding going were convinced that it was real enough, even if we couldn't find a way to reliably harness it and find predictive capabilities?
Yes, I would say that there was probably that assumption that they felt that it's almost like, throwing whatever you can on the wall to see what sticks, the proverbial statement. And probably there was whether it was very high cost, I mean, really, in my mind, hiring three, four, five, six individuals to sit in a room or do a rotation, 4-hour shifts or whatnot is very small change compared to what you might get out of it. And then, was it really to kind of provide leads that would then allow us to direct our SR
Hmm.
71s out there, or U2s,
Right.
or a satellite or something out there to try to find out whether there was validity to this thing, which that would be a much higher cost
Hmm.
on the government. But there must have been some return at some level. And, I would probably advise our listeners to check out the Angela Ford video that she did with Sean Ryan. It is profoundly, I don't know, I find it frightening. Maybe others would just see it as interesting because she is so interesting, yet a little bit on the scary,
Hmm.
questionable side
Right.
that I begin to wonder, is there something more going on with her? Because she purports, and she's been the most popular remote viewer out there. And Sean Ryan, if no one is familiar with him, he is a ex-SEAL, former SEAL. He has a fairly popular podcast. He explores a lot of these kinds of very mysterious and controversial topics, and he had her on his podcast and point blank asked her, "Did you see the crucifixion?" And it was just phenomenal, her lack of response. And now I don't know, you always have to kind of look at that as kind of,
Hmm.
okay, was that kind of set up? Was that,
Right.
whatever? But, there's definitely, she has some psychic abilities of some kind. She
Hmm.
sees something. She was very non-committal on answering that question, of course, but and would provide a lot of vagaries around just different topics, but never really provided a very specific, conclusive response on anything. But
Right.
then you got to draw your
That,
conclusions on this. Is this
yeah.
really real or is it just interesting?
Right. And I think that's the problem with all of this stuff in my mind is when you look at like the people who are like the big names in it over the years, it seems like there's always just enough doubt and just enough material gain happening to just throw up some red flags. Like we mentioned earlier, yeah, we mentioned earlier Uri Geller from back in like the 70s, who very famously worked with the CIA on just basically remote viewing and psychokinetic activity and everything. But then, went on which late night show was it? Was it Carson?
It was
And then
Johnny Carson
Carson, and then he
because,
couldn't bend the spoon,
right,
kind of thing.
it was James Randi. debunked him in a
Oh yes, yes, thank you.
that
Yes.
was one of James Randi's
Yeah.
things.
So like in a granted there could like that's one of those weird situations where like I think like a lot of these things just because someone didn't do one amazing thing one time doesn't mean they can't do it,
I
but it's
I'm gonna say Yuri Geller was a really good showman because his excuses and everything on that show are so wishy-washy.
right. Well,
If
that's
if
well,
you've
that's
never watched it, watch it.
watch it.
And
Yeah.
somehow he and Randy were pretty amiable even after
Hmm.
that, which I think is good character.
Right, agreed. And that's like the others. That's like the one side of it. Then on the other side, you have these like again CIA documents. That's like a quote from it is as a result of Geller's success in this experimental period, we consider that he has demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner.
Well, I would also
So,
say too, going back to
hmm
Randy, and again, this doesn't this is not definitive closure of any
hmm
claims, except for maybe those claims. I remember Randy had been brought up. I think the college was or university was Stanford, where they claimed that they had somebody that could do some paranormal thing, and Randy was able to demonstrate how these scientists had been conned by this person.
hmm
So I mean, I don't know. The CIA isn't the litmus test for whether something
Well,
is true
right.
or not.
No, 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 absolutely, absolutely. But I'm just saying there is a spectrum of these people's legitimacy that we may be dealing with.
We
Uh,
would hope that they are
yeah,
serious in their pursuit. And
right.
it's like what you said, Brian, with some
Yeah.
of the people that were involved in some of these, they're pretty straight-laced, pretty serious people.
hmm
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it all.
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of it for me comes back to like there's the one side of the spectrum with some of this stuff that has like the hard science element, like you mentioned, Nick, with like where where's the camera placed if there is a technology that is
Yeah.
being
So,
utilized,
and I'll say this too. There is a part of me that all right. I'm going to get in the weeds and I'm going to apologize to you both right now. There's a part of me that always felt like to be able, again, because I wanted to be an intangible observer, not to spy on anything, but just to see in the history and my love of history. And I couldn't interfere. I could only see. That is such an appealing idea to me. And I think it's an appealing idea for everybody that has that love of history. I think that it would be nice. I think we believe that it is more likely that we can look into the past than into the future. I think my natural apprehension toward looking to the future has always been I would reject that because I thought that that meant everything was fated. And I just have always felt that that is such a repugnant idea to me because it almost feels like, well, why bother if everything's predetermined? Well, this just philosophically and religiously has a lot of really, well, do we have free will or not?
well,
Or
yeah,
are we
and
like Calvinists and this is predetermined?
mhm.
With again, that's just too much for me, frankly. Now, why I said I'm getting into the weeds. One of the things that makes me think, well, if you can look into the past, why couldn't you look into the future? Is again, right now, the prevailing hypothesis onto uh, quantum theory. I'm using words I'm not qualified to use, but string theory basically posits that there are numerous dimensions. There has to be. And one of the reasons why it's so popular is because it kind of resolves the problems with macro and micro physics, which I saw a great lecture in person many years ago. Blah, 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 blah. Made me a believer. The bottom line is, you get to a point where, we live our lives in three dimensions. That's kind of the easiest. We live a life from the time of conception until the time we pass, and that becomes another line. And then you could describe a fifth dimension as kind of like being a turn in that. The bottom line is we have so many, and this gives me solace in a way. We have everything we do, every factor influences a timeline. And you get all those timelines of one life and they collapse back into a point. And then there are all these others that can go from there. And this might be silly, it might be magical thinking on my part. But one of the things that gives me solace about that is that, and I'll bring it back to this real quickly. I realize I'm at an age now where I know, like, I can't learn everything I want to learn. I can't read every book I want to read. But somewhere right now, I am. I've done this thing or that thing. Okay. So maybe if we can look into the future, maybe that's just one of an infinite number of potential futures. And so maybe if there's anything to it, and I'm not saying there is, if there's anything to it, then we can take solace in knowing that just because this was seen and just because this is real doesn't mean that it's a predetermined thing. It's just one of an infinite number of possible of futures that's happening
To overly simplify what you're saying, it's kind of like a you're saying life is like a choose your own adventure book
with an infinite number
with
of
an infinite number of
possibilities.
possibilities.
It's the book that reads forever. That's
Reads
what
a
I've always wanted.
no, I think that's an interesting perspective, and
And
there's
I'm
definitely
curious though as to whether the two of you have had the same reservations about being able to see into the future.
Yes, I have. I think that there's, I tend to be a person who believes that you have a choice. You have a choice of what direction you take. And there are opportunities that go along the line that you don't expect. There may be things that we don't have control over that happen in our future. That's scary to some degree, but we do have certain choices. Oftentimes, I think human beings are their own worst enemy. And you both know that I work in the behavioral health field, and what I see mostly is that people's trajectories are changed because of generational choices or because of personal choices that have taken them down the wrong path. Maybe they didn't have the opportunities to pursue another solution or another path. I also know people that you give them a great path and they don't want to take that path. So there is a lot of choice around what we do and don't do. I think in my life, it's been mostly, I mean, I've had some good luck, inherited some good DNA, I think, along the way. However, largely what I've done and where I'm at now is because of the choices I've made. But then there's other things that I've made a choice to do that ultimately allowed me to meet you, Nick, or you, Brendan. I mean, that just didn't happen. There were choices that I made, and Nick and I have known each other a lot longer than Brendan and I have, but they all kind of they happened. So I don't, I think to some degree, it's part of human beings' desire to have control over their situation. It's just an essential part of our human DNA to know what's in the future, be able to predict in order to decrease our own anxiety around our lives.
And I have a response to that, but I want to hear what Brendan's response is first. I just don't want to let us drift away
no,
because
you can no, go ahead and answer.
oh,
It sounds like you have something. Yeah.
it's just a no. I agree with you, Brian, wholeheartedly, and it's because too, so much philosophy and religion is about what it means to be a good person, and that's what we strive for. And I think most people are pretty good, and we all fall short of,
Hmm.
the goal at times. But to say that we be bad would be to judge us by singular incidents. I think too, I don't like the idea of fated things because it says, well, that takes away my being able to have the opportunity to be a good person, to be a better person, or even to be a bad person. I just become a cog. And I resent that. because even though there's, as you say, there are plenty of things in our life that we inherit, there are plenty of things in the course of a life that we have absolutely no control over, but we still have agency, and agency is important. I was given an experiment, something to meditate on by a friend, and there's a book that talks about this, and you can both play along if you like. But this comes into this. It does. It's where are you? Where are you? What is you? And if you took that camera, the chronovision, if you took that camera and you zoom in enough, eventually you can't see your arms and legs, and you zoom in enough, and you see the pores, and I should probably wash those. And you zoom in even further, and you go into underneath the skin, and you can get to a subatomic level, but nowhere in that can you point to the thing that is you. You were all of these things, right? And if you pull that camera back out, all of a sudden now your arms and even your fingernails come back into view, and you come out and you're in your home, and that's part of you too. Your family is part of you. Your home is part of you. You zoom out further. Your town. You're a part, you're in there. Where are you? You're all of these things. And that sounds a little woo, but then you come out into the universe and you're there too. Because how can you turn to me and say that the sun isn't as vital to your being as the heart that beats inside you? And so I think, Brian, like coming to your statement about all of us meeting, I think that, we're all of these things. And again, I know that sounds a little woo, but the thing that I spoke about and all these infinite number of timelines, the great thing for me, if this is true, is that again, I'm able to do all the things I've ever wanted to do and to learn. And I know the sad thing is in some places I won't have met you, but there's an infinite number of places where we have met. And there is a very real thing that is you, and that takes a little different twists and turns. But I think that in all of those places, we're friendly and we enjoy each other's company, because if we didn't, that would mean we weren't us. You know what I mean? It would be a denial of something that is primal to who you are, even though you can't put a finger. The only way you can experience yourself is to be yourself. There I go. Brendan,
I
please
love when
stop me from talking.
I love when you guys get all philosophical. It makes me so happy inside. I absolutely love it. I'm going to be the Debbie Downer here. I think that it's all a construct. It's all perspective. I think the past is an illusion and the future doesn't yet exist. I don't necessarily think there are multiple timelines. I think mathematically it probably makes sense. But if there are, in fact, infinite timelines, as string theory proposes, that means there are, means there's a lot of bad out there too. And that doesn't feel great either necessarily. And I think that a lot of this comes from our, like we mentioned earlier about like narrative and everything. We want to put order on this. Like you said, Brian, people naturally want to control things. I think that an animal doesn't necessarily think about these things the way that we do. So I'm not sure if how we think about it actually affects the mechanics of what's going on as much.
Okay, so I've got a question now.
Yeah,
Remote viewing. Do we Are we intrigued by it because that gives us control?
I
And
think
are we reserved about it because it suggests that we don't have control at the same time?
you stole my thunder, Nick. That's exactly where I was going. Because I think that's what, like when you mentioned earlier, Brian, about the moral side of this and why it's so, the idea of a priest with a television that they can see back into the past of what you're doing, what someone was doing, seems like a moral and ethical violation. I think what that does is it removes the agency that you mentioned that you mentioned, Nick. And it makes you feel like everything is just a record that you can go back to at any given time. And again, I think what that does is that adds a mechanism that doesn't necessarily need to be there to replace the ever-present moment, which is just like the now. If there is a record of everything just sitting out there, um, that's very unsettling because I think it does go counter to how we like to organize the world in our head. And that's why when it comes to the remote viewing stuff, I've always thought that the idea of seeing what is going on right now seems like less of a hurdle to get over. Like it's still bonkers, but it seems less for some reason. And like you mentioned, Brian, there have been a lot of studies and there have been a lot of governments that have not just the US government, but also like, universities put a lot of time and effort into studying remote viewing in various forms. And there's not a lot of statistical anomalies out there, but when they show up, boy, are they hard to explain. Now, like you mentioned, Nick, some of them might be people who are hucksters, people who are in some way conning, and sometimes maybe even unknowingly, the people that they're working with, trying to remove like the moral element of that or the ethical element of that. So is it a matter of just like every experiment to test this is in some way fallible, or is there something to it? And you mentioned woo stuff earlier, Nick. I think that the thing that I think about whenever we talk about remote viewing is the idea of astral projection, which is something I don't think we've really talked about much on this show. But so the idea of astral projection is the idea, and I'm being very general here because I know this exists in lots of different societies, traditions, religions. I think where I first heard about it in any serious manner was like from a Vedic standpoint. It's the idea that you have different versions of like your body. Like you have a physical body, you have a spiritual body, and you have an astral body. The astral body isn't not physical. It's not like it's not real. It's not like it's just an idea. It just kind of exists on a different dimension or different plane. And there are times where it can separate from the physical body, just like it goes into the physical body at birth and then leaves at death, which sounds a lot like a soul from a Western, Judeo-Christian standpoint. And a lot of people have talked about, like friends I have talked about astral projection being something that they have experienced, which to me implies that there is some sort of underlying physical mechanism going on here, because in some of these cases that people talk about, it's not even something that they're trying to do. It's something that happens almost on accident, which goes a long way to explain if there is a way for us to leave our physical bodies and look in on things and move around in some sort of incorporeal world. Not only does that explain ESP, but it explains a lot of ghost stuff too. It explains people showing up in multiple places at once. It covers a lot of bases. So I think the astral projection side of things, if again, there is no temporal element to this, might be a mechanism worth looking at because you might have someone like Uri Geller who can sit in one room, and even if he doesn't know that's how he's doing it, he can look inside sealed envelopes in a completely other building, get elements right. So I think there's a lot to unpack with remote viewing. It is a big topic, Brian.
Yeah, it's a very complex topic that certainly the three of us can't really solve, but hopefully with the listener is intrigued by it enough to
Hmm.
pursue some of this learning beyond, because there's just so many integrative facets that it brings together. And essentially this show is on the paranormal, it's on history, it's on things of that nature
Hmm.
that have happened in the past.
Right.
And this is just another element. And when I started really looking at this topic, I'm like, oh my gosh, it really does tie together things like the stone tape theory,
Right.
ESP. It pulls together what's a residual haunting, for example. And I'm sure you've
Hmm.
talked about that on this show several times. Residual hauntings are things, phenomena that happen over and over again that take up a certain space and time in
Hmm.
a certain location. They're not necessarily intelligent. They are just things that have happened. They're like back when I was a kid, it was a videotape. Okay, so you
Mm-hmm.
run the videotape, and there it is. And this concept, I think that's the thing I got out of this whole topic that we're discussing is that there are certain lines of overlap here
Mm-hmm.
with this topic, beside the fact that it's very interesting and very scary at the same time to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just to me, I can only speak for myself, that it just stretches your mind and starts creating more of an idea that the more we know, the less we actually know. And there
Yeah.
are things here that may have legitimacy. And what are we actually knocking on here? What's the door we're knocking on? Because that's what I really got out of this topic, was
Mm-hmm.
not so much the wow, this is really popular and fun to study. It's more about this is creating a pattern. And what does this pattern mean?
Yeah, yeah. You said, "What are we knocking on?" And I immediately started to think there might be very real things that are. I mean, of course, it could all be nonsense, but there could be very real things that are happening. And we talked about the continuation of those studies suggest that they saw some evidence of something, but almost like you brought this remote viewing thing up, and we've talked about like eight different things that are kind of tied into it. And
Right.
that I think is really an expression of we're really struggling to pin down what are we knocking out? What is we're like the young child with the computer that has no idea what's going on, but can make it do weird things, and we're not seeing the whole.
Well, right. Well, I think that's what Brian's kind of getting at is like this is clearly a snapshot of something we don't understand.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
small part of something much bigger, maybe.
Yes. Yes. And not only is that unsettling, does it but it has, like you said, kind of moral implications. It has scientific implications, it has spiritual implications. And yeah, there's a lot to look at here. And people have been doing it for a long time and will continue to do so, I think. So the last thing, Nick, you said you had something you wanted to bring to
I
everyone
had a
tonight.
question. We can talk about it another time, but you've got something.
Okay. So yeah, well, okay, we'll save that for next time Brian's on. So the thing I wanted to do real quick, just because I thought this would be fun, was I have here a deck of what are called Zener cards. So Zener cards have been around since like the 30s, I think, quite some time. They're used to test extrasensory perception or ESP abilities in people. Many of you probably first saw these, like myself, at the beginning of the first Ghostbusters movie when Dr. Venkman is testing two college students, I think two grad students with them. So what they are is
Yeah, it was
there's a
one. It was not one gentleman's lucky day. I remember that much.
right. It was yeah, get shocked all the time, even though he was right. But so what it is there's these cards that have shapes on them. There's circles, crosses, wavy lines, squares, and stars. And then the deck I have here has like, you know, a red star, red wavy lines, green star, so there's a bunch of different colors too. And there's, I think, how many cards are in this deck?
Don't
Pretty
say it, because frankly, I think you've already jeopardized the validity of it by saying what sort of images are on it.
well, it's again, even I guess yeah, it's true. Even
Yeah, I'm
knowing,
gonna start
even
card
even
counting.
even knowing that, but so I thought it would be fun to go through a few of these and just see if we get if either of you two get either of these correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up I'm going to look at a card, whether you would like to remote view into the room. If you'd like to ask to project, you're more than welcome to. I give you full permission. My blink cameras are all off right now. Or if you want to tap into what I'm thinking when I'm looking at the card, that is cool too. You have both have full permission to do so. So I've been shuffling the heck out of this deck while we've been talking. So let's do 5 cards real quick and see if we get anything.
Do we want to
So
do it like Brian does five, then I'll do five,
yeah,
and we'll see
let's
who
see how that
wins?
goes. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, because I don't
We'll,
want to, if he gets it wrong, then I have at least 50-50 chance to
that's
get it right.
true. Yeah, that's true. So
And I
see.
don't know, Brendan, I'm in your room right now, and I
Oh
don't like how
shit.
you have that wallpaper. I think it's a little uneven.
Little uneven, yeah. Okay, so yeah, well, let's do Brian first. Okay, so let's just do rapid fire. We're gonna do 5. Nick, you're gonna keep score for us, okay?
That I can do that. And Brian did say that he has done when we brought a recording has done well at these in the past.
So we'll see. We'll see. Okay, number 1, Brian,
I'm going to say it's a cross.
what color?
Blue.
Is a black square.
Okay, so
Okay.
timeout. So do we get 1 point for color and 1 point for
I think
image?
yeah,
Or
I think
1 point for color and 2 point for image.
let's do 1 point for color, 2 point for image. I like that. That's
Yeah,
a good
it's
way
a
to do it.
0 for me.
That's a 0. I mean, really, statistically speaking, getting a few colors right isn't. Well, let's just see what we get. So
Yeah, the
okay,
scoring has been set, so let's go.
okay. Number 2, Brian. Here we go.
Yes. I'm going to say it's a star and it's black.
It is a yellow circle. Okay, next one
I'm going to say it's probably a square and it's red.
is a black circle. It's 3. Okay, 2 more. Here we go. You get into a rhythm.
I'm going to say it's a yellow cross.
Black wavy lines. Or actually, those are blue wavy lines. Okay, last one.
I'm going to say it's probably a square and it is a yellow square.
So this one is a black cross.
Oh,
So it is a little interesting that you were one off with one of those.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm gonna reshuffle these.
Brian, do
Still
you want to
pretty-
keep score for me so that we know I'm not stuffing the ballot here
Stuffing
or
the-
whatever the appropriate
well, sure. I mean, I've known you a long time. I trust
Yeah.
you.
So one point for color, 2 points for
Points
the image.
for the image. Okay, you ready, Nick?
I mean,
Yeah.
how could I prepare?
How could you prepare any better? Okay. Number 1,
Okay, I'm feeling like a blue triangle here.
blue wavy lines.
Blue wavy lines.
So
Oh my
that's
gosh.
1
Well, I mean,
point.
I've already won at this point.
Yeah, I've already
but
won.
We gotta
Okay.
see.
Okay,
Okay,
ready?
come on now.
Number
Bring him
2.
on.
Number 2,
I'm gonna go with a green circle.
green square. That's close. Okay. That's 2 points for Nick. Okay, number 3.
You would not believe how bad I am at color matching.
Yeah, I know.
On it and like
I can
clothing.
I can barely see colors.
Okay, I'm gonna go with how about a black star?
Blue wavy lines.
Wavy lines.
Okay, number 3.
Well, I
or
thought I was
number-
gonna really be on a
I
tear
know.
there with the
I know.
colors.
I know. Okay, here we go. This one.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a green star.
Red wavy lines.
How many wavy lines are in this deck?
Apparently quite a few. Okay, next one. Okay, last one here.
Green cross.
Green square. So 3 points for Nick.
Now, I'm
Not
gonna
too
say something.
shabby. Not too shabby. Yeah.
I'm gonna say something here.
Mhm.
Obviously, I have no I mean, again, what's right? I'm agnostic about the
Yeah.
presence of this, but I certainly don't feel that I have anything. And I think that was a clear demonstration that I do not, especially since I will have you know, again,
Yep.
I think you were wrong to have said, because I immediately wrote down the different shapes. And then
Okay.
as Brian encountered them, I wrote down the other shapes that were there. I also wrote
Okay.
triangle because I felt pretty strongly that triangles would be represented.
They should be represented.
They should be represented.
It's funny. There actually are 2 more like wild cards in here,
Oh yeah.
but I'm not gonna
But
tell you,
I mean, the
I'm not
bottom
gonna-
line
I'm not gonna tell you
was
what they are. Yeah.
the bottom
Just-
line was
Yeah.
that I figured at least through the process of elimination, I even put the colors that Brian had encountered
Mhm.
that I'd be
Like-
able to hit a couple. So in a
Like-
way, I'm card counting. In a way, I'm trying to like hedge my bet. So
Right.
I don't think it's that radical that somebody would get a
Right.
few, especially
few.
if they start to recognize patterns. Like
Mhm.
it seems like there's a lot of these wavy lines Had I seen Brian hit a lot of wavy lines,
Mm-hmm.
I either would have said, well,
Like,
either this deck
is there
staff
an,
with him, or I
yeah,
probably shouldn't go wavy lines because maybe Brian hit
right,
them all.
is there an equal distribution or not? Like, is it,
So I
yeah,
think this
yeah.
has more to do with my taking some probabilities into account,
Probably, and that
because
very well
I don't
might
even
be.
know how, like,
Yeah.
when you say, like, prepare yourself, I don't even know how I should go about doing that
Yeah.
for a skill that I
May or may
right.
not exist.
Well, not even that. I mean, if it does exist, I certainly can't do it, or I have no practice at that. It's like
Hmm.
if you told me to ride a unicycle,
Yeah.
I would probably have more inherent skill, and I could probably try to figure out some way to prepare myself
Good figure
for
out.
that. So, Brian, Ed, what are your thoughts?
I'm having an off night, I think.
Guess so.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because there are times, and I don't know if I've discussed this before on this show, but there are legitimately times when I will have a thought pop into my head.
Hmm.
I might be getting ready in the morning. And it's like I'm not trying to control it, but I'll have a thought that I'm going to, and this is actually happening. Somebody can laugh about this, but I have not maybe heard from Nick or you for a long time. Maybe it's been a few months.
Hmm.
And all at once, someday I'll say, well, I wonder what they're doing. And then I get an email later on the day. That has actually
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what?
That's.
The most dramatic example I have of that, I remember my good friend Brandon. He had moved, we grew up on the same block. He had moved away. And then about 2 years after he moved, I would still see him periodically. About 2 years after he moved, this is before either of us drove, I heard a knock on my door. And Brandon did not have a distinct knock, but somehow I knew, oh,
Hmm.
Brandon's here. And sure enough, there he was. He had got on the wrong school bus. And so he took his old bus.
Yeah.
So I have had that. And that is a really wild thing because it seems, and this might be like the remembering the
Right.
positives, it seems like the only time I have a thought like that, it comes to be.
Right. Yeah. Like, are you just not realizing when that doesn't happen, or is there something to it? And
So
I think there's something to it. So.
so at the end of the day, I remain wholly agnostic as to the remote viewing and everything. I don't understand the mechanics that could be. I think it'd be interesting if this is a natural ability that we have, that somebody could create a machine that could replicate it. That's kind of like making a robot that could ride a bicycle, I suppose, or making a calliope.
Mm, yes. So if you out there have a thought on remote viewing, if you have any experience with it, or if you have any stories around it, we would love to hear them. So, but before we let you know how to do that, I want to say again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Brian. This has been so much fun. Hopefully, we'll have you on again, and it won't be such a long time between. So,
Can't wait to be back.
yeah.
This is a great experience.
Yeah, it's always fun having you. So if, like I said, if you out there have any stories you'd like to share with us about remote viewing or anything else, or anything you'd like us to look into, you can find us on YouTube and Instagram at the Ghost Furnace Podcast, or you can send us an email at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.